So I just want to start off by saying thank you all for joining on a Friday afternoon. My name is Brandon Hummins, and I'll be running the session today. And I want to first congratulate everyone on taking at least a little bit of time out of your week for your own personal development. What we're doing right now today during this next hour or so is not going to be your standard, I get up here and I talk to you guys about something. What I'm trying to do right now, and this is actually a project somewhat sponsored through ISM. I'm developing brand new educational material that is going to forward the way we do business. This isn't just for procurement professionals. This is also for sellers, stakeholders, and everyone in between. The main concept here is that we are focusing on issues and trends that the world of procurement is going to be headed toward tomorrow. So a quick example of that, a lot of what we're doing this year is focusing on the human element of procurement. And what do I mean by that? We're doing a webinar series once a month where we talk a little bit about what connects us as people in the way that we do business. So we started this off with an HR session that talked about how do you connect your personal life into advancing your career? And then we got into a little bit more of a technical aspect of it all in terms of how do you actually use psychology in negotiations and dealing with some of your stakeholders. And so today, what we are going to be focusing on is how to introduce sustainable procurement practices into your everyday roles. Now, why are we doing this, right? It doesn't really matter, and I say this in a weird way, and please listen to me for a moment, but it doesn't matter if you care about sustainability. That's not going to be the point here. I deeply care about sustainability, but that's not going to be the outcome and point of today's session. Today's session is going to be focused on how do you, as a professional, once again, whether you're on procurement or you're on the selling side, bring more value to your client, supplier, or stakeholder relationships, and then also deliver more value to the company. Now, what does that do for us? A lot of companies right now are struggling financially, and sometimes it's because we don't have enough people on board that are able to focus in on some of these strategic parts of the business. What do I mean by that? We don't have enough professionals that know how to do the things that keep businesses strong. And where can we get selfish in this path? Because honestly, we don't go to work because it's fun. Some of us do. Some of us are retired and go to work because we really, really enjoy it. But we go to work because we need to earn a living. We need to support ourselves. We have dreams. We have our own goals. And part of what I'm doing through this entire series is connecting that part of your personal life, admitting that it's okay to be selfish with your own progression, but then to also use that to drive value for yourself and for your organization and for some of your partners. So here are some examples of what that's going to look like, right? Imagine you're able to make yourself more valuable to your company because you're bringing in more innovative skills and more innovative concepts to the table, right? That is the first step. You're bringing yourself to your organization as a more valuable contributor. And then the next part is because you are more valuable, you're bringing more bottom line revenue to the company. Now, whether this is in a small way or a big way, the point is you were able to do that. And that is part of the idea that I'm going to be pushing forward. So before we even jump into things, I want you guys to start thinking about a project or a relationship, something in your normal course of your day that you're currently working on. That is going to be the first step. You have to get that project in your head. And then as we go through this session, well, one, I'm going to get to know you guys just a little bit better just throughout the time that we have together. But then two, I'm going to focus in on the project that you're thinking about. And I want to add in an actual sustainability concept to that project. That is going to be the end goal that we have here today. Before I jump in, are there any questions, thoughts, or concerns, or does anybody want to do anything differently? Are we aligned on the outcome and expectation? And do you guys have any thoughts before we jump into things? All good to go? We're a small group, so it's okay to talk.
Good to go.
I'm
Awesome.
good.
Awesome. All right. So, quick rundown of the agenda. I've already talked a little bit about our objectives, but I'll spell that out in detail in a moment. And then I want to get on the same page in terms of defining what we actually mean by sustainability and sourcing. And once again, it's not just going to be sourcing, it's going to be the beginning, the end, and everything in between. And then, because we're now moving in a digital era, I want to focus in and hone in on a niche of this entire spectrum of sustainability, sourcing, and buying and selling. And that's going to be incorporating digital elements into that process. And I'll talk a little bit exactly more about what that means in a second. And then I have 3 case studies that I want to share with you guys. Real situations from companies that we all know about where they have introduced sustainability to their benefit. And I'm doing that so that we can also understand how that impact is made so that when we go back to work on Monday or wherever we're going, I'm actually headed to an ISM conference Monday. Hopefully I can see any of you there. But when we go back to the real world, we're thinking differently. That is part of the idea here. Because once we are finished with those case studies, we're going to then move into that brainstorming session and some of those activities. And then I give you guys a few quick takeaways. Any questions before we jump into that, now that we've seen the agenda? All right, I'll assume we're good to go. The first step here, and everybody can see my screen, correct?
Yes.
Perfect. I remember one time I was doing a lot of talking, and because we had gotten out of a breakout room, so I also do a lot of teaching through ISM as one of their instructors, helping people get certified, helping people understand different negotiation tactics and techniques. And one time I was kind of doing this talk after a break. No one could see my screen and no one said anything. So sometimes I know that we've been doing the Zoom thing for a number of years now, but I always have to ask. So the first step that we're going to start off with, everybody, is how do we actually map out and understand our sustainable journey in sourcing? And the part that I have up here at the top is value and then over to negotiation. Often, whether you're buying or selling, what people really want to walk away with and understand are how can I negotiate better? One of the ways is introducing sustainability to the measure. So if you walk away with anything from today, it's going to be with another negotiation lever that you should be able to modify and then apply to every single situation that you approach. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, how can I put sustainability as a negotiation lever? How do I actually use that to either save money or drive value with my stakeholders, clients, or suppliers? The biggest way to do that is you have to start thinking about sustainability as a value add that does not always need to be a cost driver in terms of cost reduction. It can be a value driver. And let me put this into a real scenario for you. I was talking to a friend earlier this week, and she's going through a situation where she wants to get a raise, right? So she doesn't feel like she has a lot of data on her side to constitute this raise. And I was talking to her about it, and I was saying, well, let's say, for example, you're working for an organization where they may not be doing raises across the board. How do you improve your quality of life during your next annual performance review? One of the ways is saying, hey, maybe you can't pay me more money as an employee, but you can give me a better quality of life. Now, what does that look like for some people? Maybe it looks like more work from home days. Maybe it looks like more vacation days. Maybe it looks like you're being able to work on a strategic project that gets you visibility to leadership or more education opportunities for your development. There are a lot of different ways to add to your well-being other than the more money factor. And so when we think about that in the terms of our business world, right? How do we talk to our clients? How do we talk to our stakeholders? How do we talk to our suppliers on adding more value when money is not one of the things that we can truly put on the table here? That is the concept that I want you guys to start to walk away with and understand that you can look at it and say, all right, you can't give me a cost reduction, supplier, but can you add to my sustainability goals? Let's say, for example, I can give you guys 3 quick things that you can think about sustainability and negotiation. The first one will be, are you willing to do more amped up and specific reporting on your sustainability measures? So you might not be capturing that sustainability data in that supplier relationship right now. Maybe you're too busy to do that. Maybe you don't have the tools to do it. One of the ways that you can get value out of your supplier or out of your stakeholder or client is to ask that they deliver some of that reporting, put the onus on them. So therefore, yes, it's a time requirement that they may have to do, but if they have some of those digital tools, once again, in place, it may not be too much of a heavy lift for them. And then the value of them giving you that data is supreme in terms of how do you actually report that back, right? The next one that you can think about as a negotiation lever is maybe you have a drive, right, to reduce waste for all of your supplier groups, right? If you're able to get a commitment from them on their waste reduction, you might actually be able to lead into contributing to your waste reduction goals as a company, right? By capturing how much your suppliers are doing that. And then number three kind of comes off of number two. Think about this. Imagine they go through a waste reduction exercise so that they can, kind of go back to point number one and report those numbers to you. But then two, that waste reduction exercise could then indirectly or sometimes directly lead to cost savings on their side. So now it's costing them less to do the same process because they're wasting less materials. Maybe they're doing something like, rearranging the way that they do deliveries, right? Maybe they do something different with their last mile delivery program, something, right? Allow them to be creative with it. But if they can reduce costs on their side, it's much more likely that after they have then realized those costs, that they're able to pass those savings on to you. So think about this as a long-term gain. Maybe you can't get the savings this year, but if you implement this sustainability strategy this year, through those cost savings that they're able to achieve over the course of the year, by that next renewal, by that next business review, we're able to actually realize some of those savings in the entire price of that relationship. I'm going to move on quickly, just in the interest of time here, and talk to you a little bit about the three segments of what we mean by this. And this is just to get us all on the same page. Because sometimes when people say sustainability, they only mean one part of it. And in the world of today, we actually mean a couple different parts when we talk sustainability in business. The main concept of this, though, is that we are doing business in a sustainable way so that future generations' needs can be met. We're not using up everything today and creating something that's going to spiral out of control in the future. And this matters for a couple different reasons. One, if you don't do it this way, you will see yourself in an industry that's ultimately crashing in the long run. And we don't want to be contributors to that. A part of, once again, humanizing the way that we do business, humanizing the way that we do selling and buying and all the stuff in between, right? Is understanding that it's not just taking something and selling it, but caring about all of the repercussions that come from that. Imagine you sell flowers and the only thing that you do is go to the garden to pick the flowers. Unless you're planting, you're going to be out of business in no time at all. And whether it's the environment that we care about or the money that we care about, sustainability practices are what needs to be in place to make us successful. And then the other side that you need to start introducing is it's not just going to be the environmental side of sustainability, but it's also going to be the social equity side and understanding how do we balance that approach with the other parts of our economy overall. So sustainability could look like you not so like right now, for example, I'm negotiating with a current supplier of ours, and they continuously make missteps in our relationship. And because of these missteps, they continuously owe us credits. Now, I can take this in two different directions when I think about sustainability. The first direction is, well, they owe us credits. They messed up. Give us our money and we'll keep it moving, right? That's number one. Number two is I could step in, intervene in this process and say, yes, you owe us credits. You should be doing this. But part of what I'm going to do is help mitigate the damage to you as a company, because as my supplier, I want you to remain in strong financial standing. I want you to be successful in your goals. And I want you to be a supplier that can grow as my company grows. If I'm continuously beating you down on price, taking all these credits from you and not caring about the income, that's not going to be a sustainable model for you. And in no time, you'll be going out of business and I'll be looking for a new supplier. No one's left better off. So when we think about sustainability and sourcing, the main issues there are it gets a little bit more technical, because it's not just that we're trying to do the right thing for the environment at a high level, but we have certain rules and regulations and best practices that we should also be following. So a quick example, and you can all read for yourself, so I won't read off the slide there, but I want to actually give you an example of something that's happened in the procurement space that everybody should be concerned about. There was a situation in Sudan, actually, where they were mining cobalt a couple years ago, and now it's started to get a little bit better there, but the company that was mining this cobalt had made agreements with Apple and Microsoft that they found this cobalt mine, this deposit that they were going to start extracting from, and that they were going to only be using heavy duty machinery to get these raw materials out of the ground. The situation that ended up happening is they didn't do any of that. There wasn't a machine on site, but rather they had 10,000 artesian miners. So those are miners that are actually just chipping away by hand, 10,000 people in this deposit area, all extracting these precious materials. They were in huge human rights violations. And at the end of the day, that's so far off. That's on the other side of the planet. But it's our responsibility to do the right thing in that situation, right? It's our responsibility because they're not getting paid right. It's an extremely dangerous situation, and that's going to affect each stage of the supply chain line. Those are areas that we have to care about when we think about sustainable and responsible sourcing. Those are the ethical things. And then something a little bit closer to home, I'm not sure if you guys have heard, but just last year or perhaps the year before in 2022, Detroit, many of the cereal production companies in that state had gotten, well, city rather, had gotten in trouble because they were actually utilizing child labor. And this is something happening right here in America. They had teenagers packing cereal boxes. Some teenagers had actually gotten injured because obviously they don't have the proper experience, training, or decor to really carry this task out. And then let's think about the supplier's perspective, right? On that area, what we're trying to think about with suppliers is how can they emphasize that role of delivering that product in the most responsible way, reporting that back to the buyer, and helping them achieve their overall goals and business growth. The main concept there is to be a competitive supplier, you also need to be a sustainable supplier. There are some states out there that measure their suppliers on their sustainability scores. And if you have it, let's say, for example, you're in a bid for that, if you don't have a certain sustainability score that you were able to achieve, you might not win the bid. I've been a consultant for a while now. I've actually talked to businesses, I won't name them, but they've talked about the RFPs that they've done. They said, yeah, we've gotten responses back and their score, maybe we were using EcoVadis and it was in the red zone. And we said, hey, this other company, a little bit more expensive, they have a better sustainability score. And then other things obviously played in factor, better diversity scores, better customer service scores, but all of these different pieces kind of funnel and snowball off of each other, right? So those are the three different areas that we need to start thinking about. But then I want to directly translate this into how do we actually put some of these digital sustainability practices in action and start to make an impact, right? So once again, before we have this broken down into these three different areas, right? The general one, the one specific for sourcing, and then the one that we look at for suppliers. And now we have to think about the different perspectives and then how to actually implement that. Now, when we think about the digital sustainability era, what we mean by that is there are technologies that weren't here 10 years ago even that help us measure and minimize the environmental impact that we're making that could ever be in the negative way, right? We're always pushing for our impact to be in the positive way. These technologies help us get there more efficiently. Now, the thing that I also have in this presentation is an area where we can think about tips and advice on doing this without technology as well. Because what I don't want you guys to do is think to yourselves, well, Brandon, I would love to implement a sustainability exercise or practice or do something along sustainability, but I don't have the tool in place. A little bit later on in this presentation, I talk about how to do that without any tools at all. I don't want you to ever feel like you need to buy something to get to the next stage. And when we talk about digital sustainability, in some cases, yes, you should have a tool in place to measure it. But in other cases, you can actually build or make your own tracking mechanisms, fill it with data, and I'll show you the best ways to get that data to get to the results that you're looking for. And once again, the goal here, right, is that you're making your business a better and more resilient business. You're the one coming with these ideas and practices, therefore maximizing and amplifying some of the value that you have to the organization, right? The other way here that I have on here is how do you actually think about collaboration, whether it's with your stakeholders or suppliers on getting you that information. So then let's move slightly over to that middle column and talk about digital sustainability and sourcing. What we're trying to do here is implement certain tools like AI or blockchain into the process to fully understand where we at each step of our supply chain in terms of sustainability, right? So those are those technologies that we can somewhat implement. And then the other side is ethical sourcing. Now, once again, sometimes this does come back to tools. I'm not sponsored by any companies or anything like that. I'm a practitioner myself, If you don't know me, one of the things is I'm currently a senior category manager of technology procurement at Walgreens. So I'm not sponsoring any sort of technology, but when I've done my research, companies like Interos, just as an example, are really strong in the sustainability space, especially when it comes to supplier risk management. And a lot of what you're thinking about in that space, if you're not familiar with that at all, if you're a novice to the space, if you have no background in procurement, business, or any of that, all this means in the digital sustainability and sourcing space is that imagine your personal finances, right? I use this tool right now called Rocket Money. It's like $5 a month donation if you want to. But what Rocket Money does for me is it just lists out all of my different recurring expenses, upcoming expenses, and what I've spent over the last month, right? Imagine you're a business and you have all this information available to you. You know exactly who you're buying from, how much you're spending with them, who they are, what the product is that you're buying. That is your data that you're working with. Now, in the world of sustainability and risk management, what you then want to do is imagine you're, once again, going back to your personal life and your personal portfolio of what you buy each month. So think about the things that you buy. Imagine you are currently buying from Radio Shack, right? Imagine this is 10 years ago and you're buying every month something from Radio Shack and Blockbuster, right? Those are the two businesses that you visit the most. Your entire entertainment is from Blockbuster every month. You go there, you get games, you get DVDs, and then you go to Radio Shack for your DVD player and to do all of that for it. Now, risk management in these terms helps you understand that maybe you need a second source to where you're buying the stuff at. If you're not familiar, obviously Blockbuster and Radio Shack, they've gone out of business. In the world of spending millions of dollars in some situations, you need to exactly know the financial and long-term strength of your partners, right? Of all of these companies that you're buying from. And then the other side is imagine, once again, going back to your personal life, imagine you're purchasing from a company that is then found dumping chemical waste into the river, into your local river at that, right? Are you still going to support them? Well, yes, if you don't care about that sort of thing. But then if you do care what businesses do, you might say, no, I'm not going to continue to buy from this company that continues to dump nuclear waste into the river, right? As a business, those are the things that we need to care about to contribute to the sustainability of our economy, but then also to that company's brand reputation. A couple years ago, when the Ukraine war broke out, I was working for this business and we had a tool in place that helped us determine if there were certain political figures running the companies that we were doing business with that maybe we shouldn't be connected to. And once the war broke out, we actually got flags on quite a few companies that said Russian oligarchs are actually the CEOs or VPs of these businesses. And because of the sanctions, we should not be doing business with them, right? So when we think about these tools in the sourcing space, that's really what we mean. So jumping on over to the supplier side, one of the ways that we're thinking about on that area is that we want to think about suppliers, or if you are a supplier, you want to be even thinking about yourself as a better partner to the business. And how can you do that? The first step is be open to be innovative. Be open to accepting where the world of tomorrow is going. And to me, that is going to be step number one. The next stage after that openness is align on what your specific clients are looking for. Have conversations with them during your annual business reviews that says, hey, let's get the commercials up first, right? Let's talk about how much you're spending. Let's talk about what we're offering. But then I also want to ask you some questions. And if you're on the supplier side, you should always be asking these questions. And even as a procurement professional, you should be asking your stakeholders these questions in terms of what are your goals in the world of sustainability and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those are often questions that are missed. And usually it's missed because people boil it down to, are you going green or are you hiring minorities? And that's not how you should really boil those two categories down, because there's so much more in both of them. And those goals could realistically be very important. Now, don't do it as a checkbox, right? Don't just say, hey, I'm doing this just to check something off for you, but do it because you actually want to better that relationship and because you care about that other party. But if you start having these better conversations on the other side, you're going to understand, what do we need to start putting in place as a supplier or as a stakeholder services group, right? What do we need to have in place to better service our clientele? The next piece here, And right after this slide, guys, is going to be the actual workshop. So I'm giving you a little bit of a prelude. So this is the last slide before we jump in. And the reason I'm saying that to you is because what you are going to want to do is really start thinking more about that project that I asked you to think about in the beginning. Now, once again, that could be a project, that could be an issue that you're looking to resolve. If you have kind of a role that's day to day, everything's the same, think about just something that you want to do differently or change, or something that's going on in your personal life. Whatever it is, I want everyone on this call to be able to talk about their specific thing that they're dealing with. It can be anything at all, and we're going to figure out how do we insert some sort of sustainability component into that. And so because we do have a relatively small group, I do want to get everyone a chance to have that conversation. So I'm going to talk about these three situations, and these are companies that usually a lot of people know. I know people know Nike, people know IBM. Unilever is one of the largest chemical producers in the world. They do a lot of productions in terms of cleaning supplies. Some of them even are into construction materials. Unilever has a huge portfolio of production products, right? So I just want to put that out there if you didn't know them. So let's talk about the first one. And then all of these different items, if you were to go to their corporate websites, you would find these initiatives on there. For example, if you go to Unilever's Sustainable Living Plan, or rather, if you go to the Unilever corporate website and then search Sustainable Living Plan, you'll probably get 147 different hits of when they've mentioned this plan, somewhere on their website, whether it was news articles or whatever. So these are not fake situations that we boiled down here for you and put into these three quick examples here. But the first one is about Unilever being recognized for a sustainable living plan, and it aims to decouple its business growth from its environmental impact. And I think that's a very smart overall business decision. So it's utilizing digital tools to trace the sourcing of the raw materials so that they can ensure compliance and sustainability standards. So if you imagine this company that is producing and needing to pull so many natural resources, so many chemical resources, all these different things, it's trying to, and it has, and this is actually started back in 2010, it has been able to put in technology that says from start to finish, from the moment we pick something up, and then from the moment we put it into an end product and give it to a customer, we know exactly where everything has been. And this has allowed it to reduce a lot of waste, but then at the same time, understand from like the highest level down to the smallest level, the impact that its supply chain is making, and then trying to reduce that impact wherever it can along the line, right? So it's not just saying a blanket statement around, we're going to just reduce waste, but rather, hey, we have 30 million touch points. Let's figure out where the largest ones are, and then let's figure out a unique strategy to address each one of those, right? So that's the blockchain side. And so then IBM, also using blockchain for ethical sourcing, talks a little bit about IBM Food Trust, and enhances the traceability of food products. So once again, used by various companies. So IBM has put this out there for people, companies like Walmart, and I believe Target uses this as well, but it's to help reduce overall waste, manage contamination, and then improve compliance. One of the examples that they gave on this situation is, imagine that there's an outbreak. And in the past, when there was an outbreak and they couldn't track it properly, all of that food had to go to waste. They had to destroy and get rid of all of it. And in some situations, this would even be live food, right? Or live cattle, or some of the actual living creatures that were kind of going through that process. If there was an outbreak, they would say, all right, well, we can't, actually put all of these, for example, all of these pigs through production. And they would unfortunately have to terminate the batch, right? With this new technology, they can actually pinpoint where things went wrong. And so that waste is reduced greatly. And so from their situation, they're doing a lot better for the overall society, economy, and environment when they're able to reduce waste in that way. And then lastly, for Nike, it's trying to, Nike is an extremely efficient company overall. It has this thing called Flyknit technology that is also about reducing material waste. And this is in 60% of waste reduction compared to other footwear manufacturing companies. And then they also use big data and analytics to understand their supplier performances and sustainability. So they're having their sustainability on their first tier, which is their internal and what they're trying to do for sustainability metrics. And then they're also doing their second tier and tracking their suppliers as well. So those are three quick examples. And now I want us to start jumping into the workshop. So once again, be thinking of a project that you can speak to, right? It doesn't have to be a project. Once again, it can be any problem, anything that you're dealing with that you want to advance, or that we can talk about implementing some sort of sustainability exercise within that, right? And the next screen here, it might seem a little overwhelming, right? Because it's going to be a lot of information, but it's for a purpose. You're just going to look at it. There are 20 different things on this next screen that you can use as examples. And what I would do here is take a screenshot of this if you like. And also I could just send this presentation out to you guys after this if you would like. But we have 20 different ideas where sustainability, or a tool of sustainability, can then be used to be implemented into your project, right? So we have 3 people left with us. We did have to have, I think, 1 or 2 people that unfortunately had to drop from here. But for the 3 people that are on, so Jomar, Christiana, and Lauren, what I want us to be able to do is each of you kind of think about this for a second, think about a project, and then I want us to brainstorm, right? And so we're about a little over halfway done with the session. We're at perfect timing. We're just going to spend probably the next 10 to 15 minutes or so just having this brainstorming conversation, right? So as you guys are doing that, you know, I want to have anybody, any of the 3 of you kind of volunteer whenever you're ready to kind of talk about, hey, I'm going through this thing at work. Let's talk about it. Let me bring something back to the office that maybe can be a little different, or just a different way of thinking, right? But I want to give you a quick example of how we could do something that we see on the screen here. So I have done a lot in the data space, or really in the IT space in general, but a lot also in data and how we utilize data, how we manage data centers and whatnot. And when we think about the idea of a data center, let me kind of break down some of these concepts. A lot of us kind of have these general ideas of what data centers are, but a lot of us don't know the amount of energy that goes into them. So data centers require a lot of power, and in some situations, a lot of space. It's because usually what's happening is they're running these servers that are running very large workloads. And when we think about workloads, think about your SharePoint at work. And that may not actually be the best example. Let's think about, I like video games a lot, right? Let's think about a server for a video game. Let's say this is an online multiplayer game. Let's say the more players that join this game, the more that we might say it's requiring for processing from a particular server, the more workloads it's required. And when we think about workloads, it's also related to what we call MIPS. And what MIPS really are how many millions of instances per second can computers process. I know that's getting a little complicated, but the idea here is that you can have a physical device that's helping you connect people across the world. And the more people that need to be connected, the more power and space, and sometimes the more devices that are required to connect all of these people. Now, there are some companies that offer cloud solutions to this, right? So let's say I'm an individual developer, and instead of my own servers and my own data center, I want to utilize a data center as a service from a company like Oracle. So Oracle's data center at that point, instead of me having these physical spaces that I have to manage, Oracle has the technology and then facilities to add to their capacity without needing to add the equivalent amount of physical space. So, and that operates within their cloud then by utilizing their technology in their spaces. So I can get rid of, let's say I had the equivalent to 3 office spaces, right? Not entire office buildings, but like just rooms, and maybe the amount of rooms that I had was pulling a ton of power. Once I'm able to move that over into the cloud, I may look at that as a normal procurement project, but one of the things that I can then do is start to track the sustainability impact on that. I can say, well, yeah, we saved money by moving to the cloud, but we also saved on power. We also saved on emissions, right? Because these servers require a lot of cooling. And when you cool something and cold air blows in, hot air and pollution is blowing out somewhere else, right? So I'm getting rid of the need for that. I'm getting rid of the need for space. I'm getting rid of the need for physical management of something, right? So I'm reducing that environmental impact in several areas by moving over to the cloud, right? And so that is one of the ways in the digital time that we can do that. Now, not everything needs to be IT related like that, right? That is a little bit more of a complicated situation. It could be as simple as you're in logistics and maybe you're a supplier that is in charge of getting the product to your customers. And one of the things that you did was you required your entire fleet of drivers to operate on electric trucks. So all of a sudden, you've made this huge impact to the environment. And yes, that investment in the beginning, that initial investment might be big, but that long-term investment is going to pay off in terms of that environmental impact. We're getting a lot less emissions off the road. We're getting a lot more reporting to our stakeholders and client groups on the impact that we're making. If they're measuring us as a second party supplier or third party supplier in that way, second tier, then they're able to add to their goals and objectives. So I'm going to pause there. And I'm going to ask you guys, Jomar, Christiana, and Lauren, are any of you willing to start us off? Jomar, how about you kick us off? Do you have a project or a thing that you want to talk about?
Sure. Well, I'm fairly new to SDG&E, that's San Diego Gas and Electric. But the first project that I've been assigned to is the Cameron Corners microgrid. So the project is really to install a microgrid. It's part of the ongoing effort to reduce wildfire risk and the impacts of in sense of if we had some sort of blackout, that this microgrid would be able to power up essential community facilities such as middle schools, the libraries, or any family medicine facilities. So I'm just trying to think, and just reading through the list that you have here, I'm trying to think of how I could perhaps use sustainability into this project.
Well, let's think about that. If you guys don't mind, Christiana and Lauren, if you guys have any ideas for Jomar, let's talk about this as a group for a moment, right? Even if we only spend a couple of minutes on it. And then also, Jomar, how new are you to San Diego Gas and Electric?
8th day.
8 days. Wow.
Yeah.
I was at your organization 3 times. I helped you.
Okay.
I was the trainer that helped your team get certified for their CPSMs.
Oh, nice.
They just got finished off. So I love the space. I was in both of your offices. I think you guys have one right downtown and then one of them kind of off to the side near the edge of town.
Right.
Or rather in that very large building, I think that you guys share with a couple of the groups. Or no, you guys are actually completely separate, because I also did your training for your sister company, SoCal Gas. So
SoCal Gas,
for both of you guys. So that's actually what brought me out to California 6 times over the past couple years, and I don't know, love the space. So as a group, though, everybody, Christiana and Lauren, also let's talk about how can we potentially introduce a sustainable element into Jomar's project, where he's dealing with a microgrid that if there was a blackout, that microgrid would be able to power critical facilities in the space, such as, I believe you said, Jomar, like hospitals and schools primarily, right?
Right.
Okay, wonderful. Christiana and Lauren, do you guys have any thoughts or ideas on this one as we look at some of the potential tools on the screen?
Honestly, so of course, Jomar is actually a new contractor to my group. Hi, I'm Christiana. Brandon,
Yeah,
you know
I work with Christiana.
So I know that a lot of what we do, since we aren't the ones that are providing the battery energy, we have a supplier or a contractor that's the one that's coming in to both design and construct these projects. Our focus on sustainability occurs during the actual supplier selection portion of this. We have the suppliers as potential bidders come to us asking, we ask them for what sustainability measures they will be taking during this project, and we do factor that into our decisions we make. So it's, are they choosing to use sustainability measures within their construction? Are they factoring in different materials that they may be able to utilize or substitute that may create a higher level of sustainability within the project? Are we looking at something that maybe has better recyclability factors, or is there something that provides a longer lifeline or lifespan for the project or the technology that we're implementing in this project, so that we aren't constantly having to expend more resources that may not be on the same level or plan for sustainability? So we more since we're dealing so much more with the actual construction and services side of things, we are taking sustainability into account at the beginning of the project rather than supplying the means and methods for the suppliers who are actually or the contractors who are performing the work.
That makes a lot of sense. So, Christiana, then let me, well, both you and Jomar, let me ask a question. Have you already put in place the ways that you're going to measure some of those results?
So we do have, well, we used to have a sustainability management role that we're working on getting refilled, but we did have someone who was actively looking at the different suppliers preemptively to see what sustainability measures they use within their own companies, as well as what they're going to use on the project specifically. So we do measure that with questionnaires and other forms, or just we also have some free form options for them to tell us how exactly they plan on introducing or thinking about sustainability within the project. So that may give them a way to understand that we're looking to have that as a priority, and so that they can factor those in and kind of plan to make sustainability a part of their work plan as they're doing all of this.
Right. And my thought about that even is, let's say, for example, if they have that sort of need from you guys, maybe they don't have the technology now, but if you guys require that sort of reporting, they may choose to buy that technology and then use that with their other clients as well, right? So you could really look at that as an investment that they could make in their business to do a little bit better. But yep, Jomar?
No, I was just commenting on that. It's a great point, actually.
Yeah. Because I think that, part of what you have to think about sometimes is how we talk to vendors is going to be how we can also influence them. So let's say, for example, if one of the things that you're trying to talk to this vendor about is buying this tool so that you guys don't have to buy it, right? There's also what I have listed on here. I think it's number 7. Yep, supplier sustainability performance platforms. EcoVadis is a really good one, right? Where they require the supplier to pay a small annual fee, and then they help their reporting metrics. They become the technology for that reporting that is then delivered to a company like San Diego Gas and Electric, right? So what you could do is say like, hey, this is something that's going to be to your advantage, not just with us, but for other people. So you don't really put it as, here's an added cost that you guys are going to try to pass along to me, but rather here's something that you should use to invest in yourselves that will have some sort of return further down the line, especially if you almost make it a requirement during the bidding process that they have some sort of tool or technology that is going to do the sustainability reporting. I would almost say that's a requirement if you guys have your sustainability director kind of out right now, where they would be doing some of the internal work. You should probably put a little bit more of the heavy lifting on the supplier in that situation. But Jomar, I think that's a really good example.
I agree.
Wonderful. Any other thoughts that you want to add to that, Jomar or Lauren or Christiana? Lauren, what are your thoughts?
This is just interesting because I'm coming from a different side of it. So I'm not actually purchasing these. I'm working with my clients to basically vet out different vendors, right? I'm a cybersecurity advisory role. So say Walgreens were to come to me and say, hey, we want to look at these 10 different vendors. So rather than you going vendor to vendor, it's my role to really vet these people out, investigate the requirements that you guys need. So I kind of haven't even looked at it from a sustainability standpoint. But if I were to talk to, my procurement folks and be like, hey, what are the actual things that you require from a vendor? We can kind of knock out some of these folks right away. So you're not spending all of your time as my client trying to vet these out. Like that's something that I can actually take into account rather than just like looking for costs and licensing and things like that. Like what are other requirements you have as an organization that you need to hit for your, DEI or whatever it may be that I can help vet out for my clients. So that's very helpful to kind of hear that side of it too.
And honestly, Lauren, when you said that you were going to attend today, I built in some of that thought because of that moment. I really would like more suppliers, people in your role in general, to ask more of those questions.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's super helpful. It's something, like I said, I didn't even think of. They're like, okay, we need to, manage our risk, or we need to ingest some sort of data, but it's like, what are the vendors that are actually available, and are they going to hit the goals that you guys need? Because that's extremely important. I'm not just going to throw a product out at you just because like they're the latest and greatest and fanciest one on record, but there's going to be all these other elements of that vendor that are going to be important down the line.
And then let me ask you a question, Lauren. Do you ever see an opportunity for sustainability in the cybersecurity space?
I mean, it's such a vast space. There's so many different, obviously, aspects of cybersecurity that you're going to have, right? I don't know. I'd kind of have to think that through a little bit further.
Well,
I'm a little bit in this role in general.
So
I've been here for about 5 or 6 months. So I'm just trying to kind of vet out all different angles of best ways to really help my clients in what they need to be doing. So
can I make a slight suggestion or a thought here, actually?
Absolutely.
What about because you said part of what you do is supplier vetting, right? Like
yes,
vet
help
some
my
solutions and whatnot.
clients kind of not have to deal with 10 vendors at one time, right? It's all siloed through me. I'm vetting everybody out for the requirements that my customers need.
Right. And some of these situations, at least from what I'm familiar with, if this is a very strategic account, and let's say we're moving on to the finalist stage, there might be moments when they want to take a supplier on-site visit, right? Does that
Right.
ever happen with you? Or has that ever happened? Or do you think that might happen that, you might have a client that says, I want to do an on-site visit?
There's definitely a possibility of that. I haven't come across it quite yet, but I could see that being a possibility in the future.
And I guess I see it a lot less often now, but I do see it as something that I have seen it happen quite a bit before. And it's mostly to confirm, like, hey, you're actually a business, you're actually there, and to also see some of your physical security that you're assisting with the cybersecurity of too. I'm wondering if you could introduce a certain type of virtual reality in some of your evaluations to help them understand a little bit of the setup, right? So part of what I think about, and this may not be directly related to cybersecurity, but like I was saying before, data centers. We have suppliers right now that are managing our data centers and then talking a little bit about how's the security, like the physical security part for those data centers managed. And for certain situations, we're like, all right, we're going to have to fly out there to look at it. And I'm wondering, would there be the possibility of a virtual reality situation that could help us not have to jump on a plane, spend emit all that extra carbon from the travel? Like, imagine if you're able to put on glasses and you're saying, like, hey, I'm on a live call with the client and I'm going to walk through this facility doing even the things that they ask me to do, right? If they ask me, hey, turn left and, is that guy, have credentials on his computer? Is he, a risk or an exposure? Look around this way. Does everybody have a badge that they're walking around with? So different things like that that may not immediately be obvious. And I'm thinking that you could insert to say, hey, this small ad that we're putting in our piece makes our clients happier and eliminates the need for certain site visits just in case that would come up.
Yeah, and I came from Lumen Technologies for 14 years. So data centers were obviously a huge portion of our business. So we used to have to do the walkthroughs, right, and show the security and show actual data centers and do those. And people would come in from out of town, and I'm sure, that would be a really cool concept to not have to do that.
Exactly. And then, Lauren, did you have a project or a thing that you wanted to share and talk about during our last couple minutes? Say that one more time. I'm sorry.
Nothing specific really at this time.
Sure. Well, if something comes up before we drop off, please talk about it. That's totally fine. And then Christiana, as I'm saying your name, I feel like we've met in person, right? I feel like there is a Christiana that I feel like I've met at San Diego Gas and Electric. No?
Oh, I'm sorry. What was that? Yes, we have met.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So I'm like, I feel like I remember you. I don't see your face, but I'm like, that name, San Diego Gas and Electric, that you said you're from, definitely feel like I remember you and calling on you a few times.
We spoke during the CPSM classes.
Perfect. Yep, that's what I'm remembering.
So I was the one who suggested the role play exercise, the addition of the role play exercise in your first session for, I think, session where we got to negotiate and ask them to negotiate prior to actual offers.
Nice. So what's interesting is I have started to put that in a lot more formally in some of the classes here. So I'm actually headed out to Colorado in about 2 weeks to do another session very similar to that. I'm actually doing the leadership CPSM session with them. And ISM does not actually have those built in. I always built those in and I'm like, hey, we're going to be kind of bored all day going through this material. Let's do something fun. And so even your suggestion there, I've kind of built in. It's kind of built over time, long story short. But did you have a project that you wanted to talk to us about?
For me, again, I think that most of my projects kind of are centered around what we were talking about earlier, in that we address sustainability ahead of the actual project being contracted.
Mhm.
That we're definitely going in a direction of implementing things like TPRM into sustainability and understanding what risks may occur before we start looking at sustainability measures. So that's definitely something new that we're kind of shifting towards. Because I think that understanding future risks can affect the way that we view sustainability now and how we address to kind of preemptively figure out what we need to value.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And what would you say the future of what would you say is the biggest thing that from a sustainability risk perspective that SDG&E should be worried about in the future? Or what do you
Of
think
course,
is the upcoming risk? Yep. Sorry about that.
no, it's okay. I mean, I think that's really in California, we definitely have to look at the goals and initiatives as a publicly regulated utility. We need to look at what California is mandating or requiring. That's probably our biggest personal concern, is making sure that we are aligning ourselves with the state's goals in
Mhm.
order to either exceed those. I think that's where we're probably looking at for the next until 2040, as I believe 2040, 2050. So we do definitely have goals in the short and long term tied to those, so that we can kind of titrate ourselves up to being able to effectively meet and exceed those goals.
Right. So it's kind of thinking about what you need to do today to prepare for what your goals are going to be in 3, 5, 10 years from now, almost.
Exactly. How do we affect change now that's going to put us in a better situation for the future?
Wonderful. I completely agree. All right. Well, thank you for that, Christiana. Appreciate it. So we only have about 5 minutes, everybody. I will just want to move on here. And this is just a little bit about communicating the value. So I'm going to be quick with these last couple slides. The reason I wanted to throw and communicate the value is because it almost doesn't matter if you're not able to talk about it, right? Let's say, I know this guy right now that I work with at Walgreens. He is a genius when it comes to his technical IT expertise. And often I collaborate with him because I say to him, tell me, let me pick your brain and figure out all of these different gems that you know, and then help you turn these into the right story to help influence and convince our stakeholders to take action on what we believe is the right thing to do. And the reason I say that is because although he is very technically accurate and very technically capable, he struggles sometimes with communication. It got awkward for me one time. I was in a meeting with him and his boss was there. And the entire time, his boss was like, we were doing a video conference with some stakeholders. His boss is just like, speak up, and doing all these different things. I'm just like, okay. So I was coaching him on a few communicating techniques, but the main thing there is sometimes it doesn't matter if you know something if you can't communicate it very well. Sometimes it doesn't matter if you're performing very well if you can't report on it very well. So one of the things that you need to start thinking about is if you are going to exemplify and put a magnifying glass around sustainability and your ability to carry out those objectives, you first need to think about, how am I going to measure it? How am I going to collect that data? And then how am I going to report on it? So even on the supplier side, so even, for example, you, Lauren, what you would be thinking about in the situation is, if I'm going to ask my stakeholders what's important to them, how do I, what do they need in order to meet some of their other goals and objectives that are not immediately evident? How do you start collecting and recording that information? What teams internally do you need to work with to gather that data? And then on the procurement side, for Jomar and Christiana, what you would be thinking about here is, how do you work with your supplier? So think about that, gather data through surveys and check-ins, right?
Mhm.
That is my example of, you don't need the tool in place. You don't need an EcoVadis. You don't need an Interos. You don't need any of that. But what you do need is consistent conversations and a process that allows for you to collect information from either internal teams or from your suppliers in order to manually compile it at times to show the results. And kind of as you said before, Christiana, what you would want to do is have that conversation and maybe do a pre-examination with your supplier to say, all right, if this is where you're at today and we're trying to get to this point tomorrow, at least we have the numbers that's going to measure current state and then in the future, that future state that we'll be able to see there. We're going to then take that information, analyze some of those trends, and then prepare those reports for that presentation. So that to me is one of the most important parts. After you've done the work, think about, before you even start, what KPIs should I be recording and tracking along the way? And then another quick slide that you guys, if you want, just take a quick screenshot of it. There's a few final tips overall, and a few on the right side, overall takeaways, right? So the first one is just make sure you're transparent between supplier and clients, right? If you're working with suppliers, always tell them, even if you don't think it's achievable by them, at least say what those goals are. Often we miss out on opportunities because we just don't think that suppliers can hit them, right? So if I'm talking to an IT company, and this has been my stakeholders' routine reaction to me whenever I bring up sustainability or even supplier diversity. I've had many suppliers say to me, or not suppliers, stakeholders say, Brandon, we can't do supplier diversity in IT. They're just not enough diverse suppliers. And that is just very untrue. So unless I go out there and I start telling my IT suppliers, hey, this is something that we want to track, they wouldn't have known. And I started doing that. They were like, oh, well, I didn't know that this company was woman owned, or I didn't know that this company was veteran owned, or whatever have you. Or they would say, this company isn't a diverse supplier, but guess what? Because we brought up our goals, they said, well, we have a huge supplier diversity program. Maybe we can add to your third tier supplier diversity goals because we're tracking all that information and we can help you out with that. So that communication and transparency, super important. The next piece here is continue to look at tools if it ever becomes possible for you to implement them, right? If you ever get the budget for it, I would highly recommend that you have something in place that helps you do that on an automated basis. And then the third piece that I think is very important is make sure that your stakeholders are involved. If Christiana, remember back with the CPSM portion, stakeholders always comes first, right? That's the main concept of the role that we do. We're satisfying, we're serving our stakeholders. And then the last two quick pieces, like I just said before, have your metrics in place and then continuously educate yourself about the next stage in sustainability. And then off to the right, I just wanted to, highlight what that means for you. These are the areas that you should be thinking about in terms of the overall benefits. If you focus on sustainability, you're going to have better supplier relationships. You're doing better for the world. You're making yourself more valuable as an individual contributor and as a procurement department or as a supplier. And you're improving your corporation's branding and building that trust factor that you have with your suppliers, while also achieving certain types of innovation as you come up with new ideas that contribute to sustainability. So we are actually at time. We're a minute over, and I'm so sorry for going over. I do want to make sure you guys get out on time. This is a Friday lunch session, right? So everybody's got busy things to go back to. But if you do have any other questions, thoughts, or concerns, please send me an email. I'd be happy to talk about it, or send me a LinkedIn message. And I'll also be sending you guys a quick survey after this, because once again, we do want to refine, revamp, and improve this short lunch and learn so that we can put this into the mainstream. And I really do appreciate you guys taking the time with me. So thank you all so much. And hopefully I'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon.
So much.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks. Have a good one.